Have you ever wondered why most buy-to-let landlords only actually own 1 or 2 property investments? Well, this video is going to actually tackle exactly that. Good day, Sammy I Can Win here, and in today's video we're going to be talking about buy to let, and specifically why buy to let has been a fad for a number of years, probably close to 2 decades now. Now the interesting thing, just to get us kind of all set off, I actually got married in 2012, and in 2012 when I married my wife didn't actually know what a buy to let was. She didn't understand the concept of buy to let. So for the sake of those who are watching this video, there may be some people who have no idea what buy to let is, so I'm actually going to explain that to start off with. Now, buy to let is the process or the mechanism that can be used today in order to buy a property as an investment vehicle. So what does that look like? And I'm going to break this down in a very simplistic fashion. If we just assume that FTB represents a first-time buyer, which is what most human beings are when they buy their first ever residential property for themselves. Another term we can write here is residential. Okay, because they both basically mean the same thing. If you're doing a residential purchase, unless it's a second home, you're usually doing a first-time buyer process. And if you're actually buying a house as an investment property, then you're usually using a buy-to-let vehicle. Now, these are the main differences which define what a buy-to-let are, and at the same time help you understand what we're talking about today in terms of the buy-to-let trap. Now, I come across hundreds of property people every single month. First and foremost through my networking event where we have roughly 100 attendees every month, and then additionally through means of all my social media platforms, etc. And people ask me hundreds of questions, generally around how they can get invested in property, and additionally what they need to do to get invested in property. Now, just the other day on the Thursday's networking event that we ran, a lady approached me and asked me a few questions, and her summary from our conversation was, okay, I just need to go and spend the money I've saved on my first buy-to-let property. And I said to her, hold on. That is not what I wanted you to take away from the conversation. And that's exactly what's inspired me to get this video out to you guys, so you guys can start to understand what I call the buy-to-let trap, which has trapped so many investors and so many landlords for so long. So let's jump in. So first and foremost, the first-time buyer is most people when they buy their first home. And there's a few things that are kind of important about that. The first thing is the deposit. Typically, if you're a first-time buyer buying a house for the first time, you're gonna roughly pay around a 10% deposit. Okay, so if you're purchasing a house that costs £100,000, you're going to be expected to pay around a £10,000 deposit. If you're purchasing a house that costs £1 million, you're going to be expected to pay a roughly £100,000 deposit. So 10% deposit is usually standard for a first-time buyer. Now there's a few nuances which we're not going to touch in this video, but the main nuts and bolts are all in this video. So if you're not aware of what a first-time buyer mortgage is, or you're even not aware of what a buy-to-let mortgage is, then this, guys, is going to be very helpful for you. After the deposit, the next thing is the assessment. And that's the question of how are these actual mortgage products assessed? So both of these are different types of mortgages. And for those of you who don't know what a mortgage is, all a mortgage is a special type of loan which applies to the purchase of a property. Now the two words mortgage actually stand for death grip, okay? So if you go back into the origins of the word mortgage, you will find that they actually mean death grip. And the reason why is because people are expected to die with that particular loan around their ankle, wrist, neck, wherever they wear it. But the point is that is effectively what a mortgage is. It's a specific loan for the purposes of acquisition of a property. Now, if you choose to do a first-time buyer mortgage, you will generally, as being shared, have to pay a deposit of 10%. And this is usually assessed whether you can pay this mortgage back by your income. So this is what we call an income assessed loan. Now, I'm not a financial advisor. I am not a mortgage broker. So here's the disclaimer. go and speak to a qualified mortgage broker to help you move forward. If you need a recommendation or help in that regard and you're based in the UK, you can connect with us through means of our social media handles, etc. And we'll be happy to kind of refer you to people who can help you with this. But the point is, very loosely speaking, if you're a investor and you just want to quickly calculate how much your income can allow you to buy in terms of a property investment, all you need to do is multiply your income by roughly 5. So if you make a £30,000 income each annum, times that by 5, that puts you at 150. And roughly thereabouts, a mortgage lender will tend to be able to loan you around 150k on a mortgage, but you'll still need your 10% deposit. Now, how does that differ to buy to let, and where are the main nuances? Now, the reason it differs to buy to let is because first and foremost, with a buy to let mortgage, you're expected to pay a 25% deposit. Now, this gap for me is the first piece of the actual buy to let trap. The fact that most people, when they buy their first home, they're actually buying a property only having to expend 10% of the actual value of the house. So by the time they gear up, save up, get in a position to now want to get into investment property, if they go the traditional buy-to-let route, and as I said, end up in the buy-to-let trap, it's usually because they haven't realized that they have to raise an additional 15% in order to invest at that level. Secondarily, where it actually, in my opinion, gets a bit easier is in the buy-to-let world, you are not generally income assessed. Now, there are some expectations. So I would say qualifications. And just to make it simple, in order to qualify for a first-time buyer residential mortgage, you need the 10% deposit. So your deposit is a qualification in and of itself. But besides the deposit being a qualification, additionally, your income, as we mentioned, because it's income assessed, is a qualification. But then also the time, the income duration. Okay, so for example, if you just got a job a month ago and you're trying to get a mortgage, because your income duration is shorter than 3 months, 9 times out of 10, that will not work. Now, guys, if you're self-employed or you're a business owner like myself, these things do change. But I'm just talking about the general case for the general person out there who needs this information. Now, going back to our point on buy-to-let, buy-to-lets are not assessed predominantly on your income. Now, your income becomes a qualification, and generally, in the traditional mortgage market, you're expected to have a 25k or more annual salary in order to be able to easily acquire mortgages under the buy-to-let regime. Now, not only is it a 25% deposit, but in terms of being assessed, here's where it gets key. It's actually assessed on the property revenue. Okay, so your actual assessment, your main assessment with a buy-to-let property is actually based on the actual property you're about to buy and its potential to generate revenue, and at what rate, and not the rate you make up like, oh, this property is going to generate £3,000 a month in rental. No, it's not based on your figures. It's actually based on figures that the lender actually does their own due diligence and decide on their own. So with these two products being the main products out there for people to go and get mortgages, it starts to become kind of clear what the buy-to-let trap is. So if you haven't picked it up, I'm going to start to spell it for you. Like I said to you, in 2012, when I got married, my wife did not actually understand what a buy-to-let mortgage was. So I had to basically explain to her what it is and how it differs from a residential or first-time buyer mortgage. That first difference that I alluded to earlier of an increase of 15% in terms of your deposit funds is part of the buy-to-let trap. It's the fact that you have to save so much more to buy a property that you're not even going to enjoy living in order to invest in property using the buy-to-let regime. Now, is that a bad thing? No, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is the way it is. And the reason why this is important is because you are not trained when you buy a house for yourself to actually acquire your first investment property. The second reason why this is quite powerful is because when I worked in my first full-time job as an estate agent, I would come across so many different investors or landlords who only own 2 properties. And I'd always say to myself, like, how comes you only own 2 properties? Why haven't you bought 3, 4, 5, 6, 10? Why haven't you hit the jackpot and gone and built a portfolio so you don't have to go to work anymore? And then when I got out of the estate agency, I actually learned the real reason. The real reason is because so many people, specifically in the UK, are what we call accidental landlords. Now, an accidental landlord, very simply, is someone who might have bought a house when they were at university or fresh out of university. Then they go and meet a partner. And then from meeting that partner, let's say they got married. That partner's done the exact same thing. They've left university and she's gone and bought a house. And now she's got a 2-bedroom apartment. He's got a 1-bedroom apartment. And because they get married, they think, well, let's choose which house we're going to live in, which flat are we going to live in, and which one we're going to rent out. And quite simply, that's what happens. They decide to live in one property and rent the other one out. Now, if that's done properly, the other property is basically placed on a buy-to-let mortgage, and as a result, they start generating rental income. But the problem is, because those properties were not originally bought with the intention to invest in property, those properties, in terms of their return on investment and yield, if that's a calculation you want to use, generally don't stack up as good investments. And what that does is keep that particular couple or that particular accidental landlord out of being able to acquire more properties. So the first issue, as mentioned previously, is the simple fact that there's a little bit of a jump in terms of your deposit funds going from a residential property to a buy-to-let property. But secondarily, the fact that the majority of people are actually accidental landlords. So most people are not actually even averse at how to look at a property and work out if it's going to be financially viable for them, whether from the cash flow or any other mechanism, in order to actually be an investment. And with all of the new tax changes, this looks even worse. So guys, I wanted to get this video out there to help you understand that the buy-to-let market in many ways is a trap for the novice investor. But there are people out there who understand how to actually navigate through that market, and not only that market, but all of the other markets in terms of creative investment, in terms of other particular strategies. So guys, be one of those people who are actually keen to learn, so on your journey you can make things happen. I'd be delighted to hear your views on some of the concepts we've been speaking about throughout this video. So feel free to write in the comments and just let us know exactly what your thoughts are about the buy-to-let market and whether it is or not a trap for most people. If you found this video of any value, feel free to hit the subscribe button and also hit the bell notification so you can stay up to date with all the information that we are sharing with the community. Side by side with that, why not press like and even leave a comment so we can get encouraged and engaged with what you have to say. If you're actually interested in learning more about leveraging as well as creative property investing, then feel free to watch this video where I'm going to break down why certain people are rich and certain people are poor as it pertains to property investing. I hope you got value from this video. This is Samuel I Can Win. I'm signing out. Have a great day.